stretched across a broken window pane. You gotta dodge the pots and pans on the floor when it rains. There's a 10-point buck on my living room wall. A squirrel and 2 ducks are hanging in the hall. That hole in my yard is a barbecue pit. A couple times a year we'll throw a hog in it. There's a 4-wheel drive parked in my driveway. I'm a proud and active member of the NRA. Hey, I'm country, I was born and raised in it. I'm country, that's my kind of living. White beans, collard greens, sweet potato chicken and dumplings. Well, I get up every morning when the rooster crows. I stay out some nights until the cows come home. I'm dog running, deer hunting, fish catching, cow tipping, hay baling, pea picking country. Well, there's my mama in the rocking chair by my screen door. The red, white, and blue hangs off of my front porch. There's my darling in the garden picking black-eyed peas. Kids are bouncing up and down on the trampoline. My truck calls sled.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on Night Dreams with Gary Anderson do not necessarily reflect those of the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, its hosts, staff, or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Listener discretion is advised.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the radio, don't let Big Brother know. They're listening to everything, even Gary's late night show. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Show Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
They are here. You are tuned into Night Dreams with the legendary Gary Anderson.
Well, good evening, everybody. Gary here, the host of Night Dreams Talk Radio. First thing I want to do is thank all the listeners out there that has made the show what it is. Well, tonight is May 16th. What is going on in Washington, D.C.? Well, a challenge of birthright citizenship. I don't even think that should be even talked and discussed about. That is really disgusting. That is even going on. But tonight, we're going to get into ufology. We're going to get into whistleblowers. We're going to get into deception with attorney Richard Beckwith, a legal mind who's no stranger to truth-seeking and defending ufology. And to those who speak out, are we being lied to? Do we actually have the right to know? And how deep does this rabbit hole really go? So buckle up tonight, get in that easy chair, pour yourself something nice to drink, and let's go for a ride tonight, because we're going to demand some real answers right here on Night Dreams Talk Radio. We'll be right back, right after Guy Ticker with the news.
This is NDTR Breaking News. We interrupt this program to bring you breaking news. I'm Guy Ticker in the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom. This just in, UFO whistleblower Matthew Brown claims he saw a video that showed a UFO over the ocean that was smart enough to know when to avoid detection. Yes, the unknown object seemingly knew when it had been spotted and started taking evasive maneuvers. Now, according to News Nation, and this just came in over the wire, during an interview with UFO expert Jeremy Corbell, Brown said, and I quote, "It's just looking at an area over the ocean. This thing just comes trundling along from underneath the cloud cover. It comes up, and then right when it's almost center frame, it scoots off to the side and, tries to get out of being observed." Following up on that, Corbell revealed that he'd already seen the footage Brown described during their interview. Corbell said, and this is also a direct quote, "I've seen it a long time ago, way before I ever met Matthew. This is a piece of footage that, within the intelligence community, if they have access to the servers, it's kind of famous." Close quote. It is worth noting that there have been claims about UFOs purposely evading or avoiding detection in the past. The most famous example is the Tic Tac video. That's where Navy fighter jets spotted an object, and as soon as they got close, it shut off. To this day, nobody has ever been able to find an explanation for what it was. That concludes this breaking news bulletin. I'm Guy Ticker in the NDTR newsroom. We'll keep you informed as developments occur. We now return you to your regularly scheduled program. This has been breaking news on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Stay tuned to your local station for further updates.
Well, JC, are you ready to go for a ride tonight?
I am. I've got my jacket, and we got some gas in this vehicle, so let's get this paranormal party.
Why do you always either gas or diesel in our spaceship? You know it doesn't work.
Oh, that's right. We're anti-gravity now.
Yeah, we're anti-gravity.
Gotcha.
Well, tonight we're going to cover a lot of different things, aren't we? When it comes to ufology, whistleblowers, people going missing, a whole bunch of things. What is going on good in ufology? What is going on bad in ufology? And, well, why isn't the Congress really moving forward on disclosure much?
I'll say this much. We have the perfect guest to cover everything you just mentioned, Gary.
Well, let's find out about our guest.
Richard Warren Beckwith is a highly accomplished attorney with a diverse and eclectic background, spanning law, microbiology, and media. Currently serving as the city attorney for Rock Springs, Wyoming, he brings a wealth of experience and expertise to his role. He is the Wyoming State Director for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, and a member of the MUFON International Board of Directors. He is the host of the official MUFON Podcast. He's been investigating UFOs for more than 50 years and professionally for nearly 20. Beckwith earned a Bachelor of Science degree in molecular biology from the University of Wyoming and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Wyoming College of Law. His legal career has included roles as principal partner in a prestigious local law firm, general counsel to Dr. Stephen Greer's Orion Project, and legal counsel to the MUFON Board of Directors. As a skilled litigator and negotiator, he's handled a wide range of legal matters, including criminal defense, construction litigation, complex civil litigation, real estate law, administrative and agency law, labor and employment law, non-disclosure agreements. Prior to his legal career, Beckwith worked as a microbiologist, studying the leaching of selenium in soil, as a lab technician in a molecular virology lab, attempting to isolate a plant protein related to the human immune response, as a lab technician in a molecular genetics laboratory searching for the ori of Serratia, and as a lab technician in an atmospheric microbiology laboratory studying atmospheric bacteria populations. His diverse background includes experience as a professional musician and broadcaster, serving as a program director, production director, news director, and air personality for numerous broadcasting organizations. As an active member of the legal community, Beckwith has held numerous leadership positions in the Sweetwater County Bar Association and is a member of the Wyoming Bar Association and the American Bar Association. With his unique blend of legal expertise, scientific knowledge, and media experience, Richard Warren Beckwith continues to make significant contributions to the UFO UAP community and beyond.
Well, Richard, welcome back to the show. It's been a long time since you've been on, my friend.
I enjoyed my last visit, and I'm sure that we'll have a good time tonight.
You know, you've been at this for a long time, 50 years. That tells me before you did it professionally. What got you involved in UFOs? Wait a minute, flying saucers? No, flying discs? Well, UFOs. What got you into it?
Well, I think it initially was my father, and he told me this story about a flying saucer, if you will, that crashed in the Southwest desert. This is when I was just, probably 9 or 10 years old. And I didn't necessarily believe him because Dad, had a bit of a sense of humor about things like that. So what I did was I did what a lot of kids did back in the day. I went to the library and I started reading everything I could on UFOs. And I read all the books in the library about it, positive and negative, and came away thinking, well, and of course, one of the things I learned about was the crash at Roswell. And I thought, wow, Dad was really correct. Excuse me. And once I learned about that, it just carried on into a lifetime interest, and it's something I've carried with me my whole life. And so I not only kept up with it, but sort of tried to stay involved and got involved in UFOs and the study of UFOs at a fairly young age. After reading all those books, when I got to be in my late teen years, I worked in radio. And one of the first things I did when I went into a full-time position as a news director was do a special on UFOs and the existence of UFOs. And it just so happened that Dr. Leo Sprinkle was holding his contactee conferences at that time. Excuse me. And so I started attending the contactee conferences and went down to Laramie to interview him as part of this special that I was producing on UFOs. And that was really my first foray into looking formally into it, rather than just simply reading books. All of a sudden, at the age of 18 or 19 years old, fairly young, having exposure to this, I went and started actually taking time to interview people and be around for certain events. So I've been, very lucky in that I've been, to a certain extent, a fly on the wall for a lot of things, having worked for Dr. Greer, having, known Dr. Sprinkle and some of the other more notable folks in the UFO UAP community. I've been very, very fortunate. I'm not much of a self-promoter. I'm just more of one of those guys that just likes to be around for stuff, And this is the most important thing in human history. And so why not do what you can to be right on the forefront of those things,
Well, we are, but the thing is, I really thought, in a way, Congress was going to do more than they did. And so far, they haven't really kept up with their commitment of, what they said they would do by releasing information on a regular basis. And also, when I watched that, to me, it was like a carnival in a way. I didn't, like Roswell, they were bringing on all these people testifying. You have two groups, right? You have the government, the CIA, you have the Pentagon, you have the military coming. Oh, Roswell never happened. This never happened. We don't have any crashed UFOs. We don't have it. Naturally, that's what you're going to expect. But then on the other hand, you have a lot of people that made whistleblowers, and I do believe we have some legitimate whistleblowers. But then we have other whistleblowers. I think they're into it for their few minutes of fame. I was talking to a whistleblower last night. I'm not going to say who it was. I was trying to get him on the show. And the first thing he said, well, I'm out to make money. So right now, this time of year, this is where I make my money. So I don't want to go on a show. It doesn't pay me anything. And then after I got done with them, that's not what it's all about, is it?
Well, it certainly shouldn't be. It should be about spreading the word and getting the truth out. And full disclosure, I'm not getting paid anything tonight.
I'm not either. People don't realize just because I put a show on, it costs me thousands of dollars a month to put this show on. And there's months I don't make enough to cover payroll and everything else. I mean, this is a type of thing you do it for the love of either broadcasting or what you believe in.
Right. And when we're talking about disclosure, that's a common thread there. And I have to agree that we're not seeing out of the Congress what we would like to be seeing out of them. And we're not seeing the disclosure out of the current administration that we were promised. I think that it's never going to happen. I think I said this earlier that, you'll get the truth out of the government about UFOs in the same way that you will get Charlton Heston's gun.
Don't make me laugh.
You'll pry it from their cold, dead hands. And so they're going, the hand is going to have to be forced. There's no way that the Pentagon is ever going to allow this information to get out absent some form of catastrophic disclosure. I'm sure that you've heard that term before, catastrophic disclosure. And so I think that absent, some sort of a global event that just simply cannot be denied, there's just no way the government's ever going to admit that UFOs are real, that we're being visited by non-human intelligences, and all of that. It's all true, but thank goodness for whistleblowers coming out and at least making a good attempt to tell us the truth about these things. But then again, I think your observation is correct, and that it's difficult to determine what to think about the whistleblowers, because some of them, as we know, have been involved in counterintelligence. And that is not to speak ill of Lou Elizondo, because I think the world of him. I do know Lou, and I do not believe for a minute the allegations made recently by Richard Doty. I think that's all a bunch of BS. I do not see Lou as a disinformation agent. He's been, he's done a lot of things in his career that are, not necessarily in his own best interests. And so I don't want to spend too much time on that, but, at the same time, we've had alleged whistleblowers that have come around. And for example, you may remember, I won't mention the individual's name because they're still in the community, but these individuals that have come out and said that they were part of this program called 20 and Back, where, they recruit you as a young teenager, and then you end up spending 20 years in the military serving on Mars or some base on the moon, and you're teleported there using teleportation technology, and then you're taken back to your room, back in time after serving 20 years, and they put you back in your body, and you're not physiologically changed in any way, but of course your psyche has changed because you've been through this 20 years in the military on Mars, in spite of only being in your closet at 14 or 15 years old for 10 or 15 minutes.
That don't make logical sense, because I had a couple of individuals back a couple of years ago, and I just wouldn't bring them back on. The one individual mentioned that they were on the secret Space Force and, the Mars, and they're protecting our planet from alien invasion and all that. And 20 years. And then she was retired and then brought back. But then, she was talking about her son who was 20-some years old. And this, it just, a lot of the stuff, it just doesn't, the numbers don't go together.
Those stories are very easy to fabricate as well, because there's no way to vet them. However, that is not to discount the possibility that we do not, in fact, have a secret space program. Now, I think there's been evidence to suggest that is, in fact, a real possibility. I look at Gary McKinnon and his particular case and the information that he ran across that indicated that we had non-terrestrial craft of some sort. He didn't elaborate on what kind of craft or anything like that. But so I think it's a real possibility that we have non-terrestrial officers, as he saw on those defense computers back before they were properly secured. but I think the things that took place after he disclosed this really sort of I guess let the government's hand show, because they really went after McKinnon. So he must have tapped into something at the Defense Department that was highly sensitive, but clearly not properly secured, which is why I think he was not ultimately extradited from Great Britain, because although he had penetrated certain systems, certain secure systems, they weren't adequately secured. And so the Pentagon, in Britain's view, bore some responsibility for allowing the information to be so easily revealed. But nonetheless, I think there's a possibility, and I have no personal knowledge myself of this, but I certainly think there's a possibility that we certainly do have a secret space program. And why wouldn't we? Because we've had the technological capabilities since the late 50s and early 60s to conduct manned operations in space. And how those operations take place, what sort of vehicles they use, I can't speak to, but I think it also perhaps portends the existence of something akin to the breakaway civilization that Richard Dolan talks about in his books about the national security state. And so I think it's very possible that there is, in fact, an operating breakaway civilization that's been able to take advantage of some of these technological advances, and perhaps even space travel. Whether we have secret bases on Mars or the moon, I have no idea, and I would hate to say that I believe that we do, but I think that we need to open our minds to that possibility. It may be that the existing secret space program is much more extensive than we could ever imagine, and we do in fact have bases on Mars and the moon, and perhaps even extensive presence in Antarctica. But again, that's all, in my view, based on speculation. And I think people that say that they know for sure these things are taking place, well, I question the providence of their information.
Well, again, too, a lot of people, how do you know that some of these people that make claims are not spreading disinformation by muddying the waters? That's the thing. But, even Armstrong, his daughter came out, recently, even has mentioned that he was threatened with his life. His wife and whole kids and all their family members were threatened by the government if he ever came out and said the truth. What he saw on the moon. Mm-hmm.
Which possibly, I don't want to say probably, which very possibly could have included ancient structures, artifacts that were clearly artificially generated, created by some other race of beings, or perhaps by even a progenitor race of humans that came from Mars. I've heard that a lot. And so I think that, again, we have to open our mind to this possibility, because in my view, it goes far beyond the notion that we're not alone in the universe. I see us playing, or at least part of a much greater fabric of reality, that being human is perhaps more meaningful than we necessarily understand it to be, and that there is something more to our existence than simply the tedious passing of the seconds and days and hours from birth until death. That there is a vast universe around us that we are a part of, and that we are all in fact spiritual beings that take part in this universe and that we create it together through our consciousness. I think that this idea is emerging as a sort of model. But I think that there are forces around us that we cannot even begin to comprehend. We're talking about intelligences that are on many, many different levels of technological development, and some perhaps that are on levels of development that go far beyond technology that Arthur C. Clarke said that any sufficiently advanced technology would appear to be magic, and I agree with that assessment. Any sufficiently advanced technology would in fact appear to be far beyond our understanding, but still be subject to laws of the universe that perhaps we may not yet be familiar. So it's important for us to take into consideration that the universe is a vast place, and our understanding of it is so limited. And the fact that we have these things around us, I think we need to consider the possibility that they're here for all kinds of different reasons, and they may not necessarily all, or very few of them, may be here for our benefit. That what is best for us as humans is not necessarily best for the universe at large, and it may be that we're just simply an experiment. But again, that's just pure conjecture.
Well, if you really look at this, Richard, look at our technology, lost technology. Like I've said on the show so many times, I think this planet has been rebooted once or twice. At the rate we're going, we're probably going to be rebooted again. But here's the thing. I have so many people through the years tell me, oh, the ETs, they would never hurt mankind. They are here to help us. You know what? It's like just guessing. It's making like if you went to court on a court case, right? On a homicide or anything, and and try to use that approach, you're not going to get anywhere. I look at, we don't know. We honestly don't know if we are being visited, what their motive is. We can guess, but that guess is no more accurate than going, to the casino.
Right. And I think that that we keep things secret. They keep things secret, and for a number of different reasons, and they sort of have to. In my view, they have to keep things related to UFOs secret as a matter of law, because their mere existence implicates so many different facets of national security. For example, it may be that the technology itself is revolutionary to the extent that it could completely wipe out our financial system. For example, a simple device that draws energy from the alleged 0 point energy field that allows us to create energy from apparently nothing, so that everything that we did would be based upon this energy that we don't have to burn and pollute our environment. Just that alone has national security implications far beyond our even being able to comprehend it. Also, the notion that these things could be mistaken for an attack. A UFO in the wrong place at the wrong time could potentially trigger a nuclear incursion or a nuclear war, simply because we may, or rather an enemy too, might think that it is under attack and therefore attack with a nuclear weapon. So there are all sorts of different reasons why UFOs create this environment in which they have to remain secret. The government has to keep them secret, just simply as a matter of law, in my opinion. They don't have a choice. And so the potential for cultural shock is just one of the many different considerations that go into this. In my view, though, the biggest reason that they keep this information secret is because of the technology. Because whoever controls the technology will control the planet, and that is the ultimate goal. I don't think they really are so much concerned about the disclosure of the possibility that we're being visited by non-human intelligences, although disclosing that will then lead to the questions, well, what about how did they get here? What was the source of their energy? Or are they from an adjacent universe? Well, but how do they power their civilizations? And those questions begin to come up, and say they don't want to even get into those questions, because the technology, the propulsion technology and the energy technology is what will allow these folks, the cabal, if you will, to control the planet. And that is the goal. We are nothing, as a species to these folks. They don't need that many of us around. And we're probably more of a hindrance than a help, considering the technology that they have available to them. But they haven't mastered it yet, and they're still trying to do that. I was reading a paper today about the computational probability that we could back engineer an alien technology.
Okay, now, Richard, we got to take a break here.
Sure.
And when we come back, let's talk about back engineering, because I really, myself, don't think we could. But that's just me. Who am I? A talk show host. We'll be back with Richard right after this. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio.
Mark your calendar now. June 5th, 6th, and 7th at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. It's Alien Abduction Week on Night Dreams Talk Radio with the legendary Gary Anderson. Live on YouTube and streaming on all your favorite apps. 3 nights of chilling stories from guests who claim they've been taken by extraterrestrials, and they're ready to tell all. It kicks off Thursday, June 5th, and runs through Saturday, June the 7th. You don't want to miss this one. It could be hair-raising, mind-bending, and just maybe the truth you've been waiting for. So don't forget, subscribe now, hit that notification bell, and join us live. We'll even be taking a few call-ins. You could be part of the show. Only on Night Dreams Talk Radio, where the strange is normal.
The color that lies within. Life in between you and I. Still right there under my skin. I've been waiting. There's no fault lines to crack and leave me aching. Sinking on the fallout and leaves me numb. There's something
2025, a year of false flags or impending contact. Do narratives hidden in the Bible and indigenous stories reveal what happened last time humanity was in contact with extraterrestrial intelligence? From international best-selling author Paul Wallace, The Eden Enigma and The Invasion of Eden. Archaeological sites, enigmatic carvings, and ancient texts reveal answers from the dawn of civilization. Harvard professor of astrophysics, Avi Loeb, says Paul Wallace provides a fascinating answer. Eric von Daniken says enlightening and persuasive. The Invasion of Eden and The Eden Enigma, available now on Amazon. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
And we are back with Richard. Now, I'm going to let you finish what you were saying before we took our break.
Can you remind me what it was?
No.
I think we were talking about back engineering.
Back engineering.
And I was just reading a paper today on the computational complexity of UAP reverse engineering, and the essentially the crux of the paper was that the capability of back engineering something as advanced as an a UAP or a UFO is what they call NP complete. In other words, it's mathematically impossible. It would be mathematically impossible based upon, an examination of what sorts of hurdles we would have to overcome, almost mathematically impossible to back engineer something as advanced as an interstellar spacecraft that came from somewhere else using advanced materials technology, a lot simply because the ability to understand the materials themselves and how they were constructed is just one of a million different facets of attempting to determine how the technology would work, because I think we have some idea that the technology has something to do with the interplay between materials, as well as and what I mean by that is the interplay between the materials and the interplay between the materials and the power source, that these things and the pilots themselves, and these things sort of all work together to propel, direct, and navigate these craft. And so the ability to figure out how that works is likely, in my view, beyond our current technological capabilities. Now, we may be able to figure out some aspects of it, like you will hear Eric Davis and Gary Nolan talk about the structure of some of these materials that they've been looking at. They, as you know, refer to them as metamaterials. And these materials, according to what I am seeing, are constructed at the atomic level. In other words, it's as though the visitors, whoever those are, and that's just a term that I'm tossing out there because they may be more than that, or innate to this, or innate to this planet or whatever. But someone is constructing materials at the atomic level. In other words, they are making new kinds of alloys, new kinds of materials, generally not from necessarily new elements. They're making them from the elements that we're familiar with, but they're putting them together in ways that we simply do not have the capability of doing. And they're able to predict, whoever these folks are, they're able to predict the properties of these materials, and they must have fantastic computing power to be able to do this, but they must also have access to some kind of mechanism or some kind of machine, if you will, that constructs materials at the atomic level, atom by atom, much like we would construct a wall. Right now, the basis of our material science is we have to go through processes in order to come up with batches of materials. We don't really have what we would call, or what we would like to call, molecular machines. We're getting there, but that's what I'm talking about. These folks, whoever they are putting things together using molecular machines. You could liken a molecular machine to a machine that in one end you put dirt in one end of the machine, and then you push a couple of buttons and program it, and on the other end you get a turkey. You see what I'm
dirty
getting at?
turkey, maybe.
Yeah, well, but again, taking the very basic elements of what everything is made out of and putting them together in new and novel ways, such that they have new, novel, and different properties. I'm sure you're also familiar with the papers that were just released from the CIA and the I think it was the CIA and the DIA regarding different kinds of these metamaterials, some that have optical properties, some that have what appear to be anti-gravitic or magnetic properties based upon their exposure to certain kinds of radiation. So whoever these folks are, they're putting whatever they're building their worlds with, they're putting their worlds together with molecular machines, which opens up, as you can imagine, a whole new different kinds of possibilities, a whole world of possibilities for constructing things and for making things that work in ways we've never even imagined. But these, we don't, just knowing that doesn't necessarily give us an edge into determining exactly how these craft work, how their power systems work. We had a conversation earlier about Bob Lazar, and I'm going
to make a lot of enemies right now, and I'm only going to say this. Art Bell was a friend of mine. He's the one that brought Bob Lazar to the limelight, and not his good friend was the late John Lear, which was a friend of ours here on the show. And the last time I talked to John Lear was about 2 weeks before he passed. And we had a conversation. I'm going to backtrack a few things, okay? Bob Lazar never went to any of these universities, colleges he claimed he went. He did go to a community college. He did take a course on computer repair. That I know, and I traced that down. Now, again, if he went to these colleges, he claimed, well, why doesn't anybody come forward and say, I remember him? Nobody has done that. His answer is, well, the government, destroyed his records. That don't make logical sense. Now, you're an attorney. To have a high clearance security job, if you have a felony behind you, about a brothel and cameras and a whole bunch of weird stuff, are you going to get a government clearance to back engineer propulsion systems on UFOs?
Well, this is what I would say about that. That I'm not here to vouch for Bob Lazar.
I'm not either.
I'm simply I simply wanted to make a point about the potential for the different kinds of ways to look at the materials from which these craft are constructed and the potential propulsion systems. Now, that being said, I think that the government, whoever that is, and in particular the folks that Bob Lazar allegedly worked for, I think it was EG&G at that time that he alleged recruited him. But in spite of having a felony, it is required when you have a top secret security clearance, if you're dealing with security information that the divulgence of which could have grave national security implications, that you have to go through extensive background checks, and you have to go through a whole rigmarole. But I would also say that if there is something in your background that the government feels is necessary for the study of their project, then they may determine, in spite of your criminal background, that you have a need to know such that they want to take advantage of your particular expertise. And so whether or not a person has a felony or not, that certainly should, and more often than not, is disqualifying. But if that person, in spite of having a felony, possesses information that is necessary for the government and for the government to have them participate in a particular program, then the persons need to know to be read in so that they can have their expertise taken advantage of to a certain extent, could be overlooked, and I believe has probably been overlooked in the past by intelligence agencies if they feel that the person is necessary for the carrying out of their program.
Well, look at World War II. We brought some high official Nazis over to develop what? Our rocket system,
rocket technology. That's right. And one of the biggest Nazis of all, Werner von Braun.
Yeah, he could have, if it wasn't, for his need, for our need for technology, he would have been hung.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and interestingly, one of the things about von Braun, of course, was, his primary interest was in the development of rockets and his fascination with traveling to the moon and perhaps to other planets. And that, I think, it saved him from the noose. Mm-hmm. But he certainly had, and the Germans, I think we can probably acknowledge, were far ahead of anyone else on the planet technologically back in the 1930s and 40s. They were, in fact, the technological leaders of the planet. And if anybody would have been able to figure out some of these exotic technologies at that time, it would have been the Germans. But I question stories about them possessing anti-gravity technology and their ability to, like for example, the stories about De Glocke and so forth. I have never, still to this day, seen any credible evidence that would lead me to believe that the Germans in any way came close to conquering or duplicating or producing some sort of anti-gravity technology. Maybe they might have made some headway in terms of some sort of anti-gravitic or electrogravitic type stuff. Because as you know, we do in fact use electrogravitic technology in some of our aircraft. In particular, the B-2 bomber uses, I think, an electrogravitic effect that is caused by the materials from which it is constructed. It has something to do with the interplay between the effluent coming out of the exhaust and the positive or rather negatively charged leading edge of the wings, which are made of some form of depleted uranium. But nonetheless, that's one of the classified, maybe now, unclassified aspects of some of our technology. We have in fact used, electrogravitic technology, and I think gravitic technology is just around the corner, but it may be of our own making and not necessarily because we've back engineered things. I actually think that they probably figured out some aspects of anti-gravitic technology back in the 50s, because remember, they were always talking about anti-gravity and how exciting the idea was. And then all of a sudden, like in the 50s and 60s, or in the 60s, they just stopped talking about it. They didn't talk about it anymore. And so either they just gave up, or they thought they found something that really led them off in some directions. Like I think there was more than one witness to the statements made by Ben Rich when he said that they had technology at Area 51 that would make Captain Kirk salivate. I think it was something to that effect, that we had all those sorts of things, but they would never make their way out of those black projects, absent some sort of an act of God. So we may have some of these technologies, but I still think it's difficult for them, and it would be almost impossible for them to actually back engineer a truly alien technology. Maybe go ahead.
Richard, you're so right. My father was an electronic engineer at Boeing, and his main project was, they were making the Super Transport. They had a mock-up version. My dad was in charge with a group for the electronics of the craft, the designing it. And, my dad was in electronics all his life. I've been in electronics since I was a kid, myself. And think about the technology. I remember asking my father one time, I said, back engineering, alien technology. My dad looked at me and laughed. He said, you know what? We can kind of speculate, if it does exist, alien technology, we can kind of speculate how things would work. But there's no way we could back engineer. Think about it. Before we had, how many years did we have tubes? Before, the transistor was invented, then the solid state, and then the solid state has kept advancing. But how many years did it take us to get to that? Now, our computer advancement is advancing daily, where computers can do. AI is advancing dearly, scary, advancing, I think, way too fast for our own technology of humanity. But now maybe in the future we can start back engineering, but going back in the 60s and 50s and 70s and 80s, I don't think, even the 90s, we had the technology to back engineer. Again, I'm just going from what my father said. I've talked to numerous scientists through the years, doing what I do on it, talking, and they all said the same thing. We can speculate what that device might do, but to go back and actually duplicate it and make it work is another story.
I completely agree with that assessment. However, I do think that it's possible to figure out certain aspects of the technology. For example, I think they've been able to discern that there are manufacturing techniques at play here that we do not have access to, which is at least being able to identify one aspect of the problem. But I think ultimately we can look at all these different things and come up with a picture, a model of how these things might be done. But again, look at it like this: like you send a motorcycle back. Let's say you have a pretty nice dirt bike, and you put the keys in it, and then you send it through a time tunnel back to the 1850s, and it goes back there, and they will eventually, making it back there, somebody will go, hey, well, look at this, it's got wheels on it, and they'll eventually, if there's gas in it, they'll get it started, and they'll be able to drive it around the desert a little bit until it runs out of gas, and they may try to duplicate the fuel somehow, but they will never be able to make another motorcycle, not based upon the technology they had back then. And that's only maybe 150 years, 160 years, in time. And so go back 1,000, 10,000 years, a million years, or even just go back 10,000 years in human history and drop any piece of technology on them and see if they're able to duplicate it. And the answer would be absolutely not. So how could we, in our present state of science and technology, ever hope to duplicate technology that's thousands or perhaps millions of years ahead of us technologically? How would we ever even hope to begin to back engineer that kind of technology? How would we even be able to comprehend how it was created or constructed to begin with? I'll give you an example.
Yeah, please.
I have an acquaintance who was at a crash site. And this was the crash site of an object in the Southwest. I'm not going to name specifically where it was at. I know where it was at, but I don't want any clues necessarily as to who this person might be. But they were on a 3-person team. And that 3-person team was the purpose of this team. It was a tactical team, and this person and 2 of his cohorts were charged with keeping people out of a particular area where a UFO had crashed. And their job was just simply to walk the perimeter, and they had orders to shoot to kill anyone who came into the area until the craft had been secured and taken away. This person has no idea how they ever got this particular craft out of this area, but this was a rather large disc-shaped object that had crashed in the desert and was sort of angled into a very hard surface in the desert, but the craft itself was not damaged, and the impression that this individual got, this person was at some point allowed, probably inappropriately so, to go into the crater that this thing created, and they touched the side of this object. And the first thing that they got was this feeling that they shouldn't be down there. But his impression was that it was, first of all, the most beautiful thing that he had ever seen. It was the most perfect, beautiful thing that this person had seen. And it looked like, according to him, that it had popped out of a mold. And so this is before we had any notion of what we might liken to 3D printing or anything like that, which is a possibility. But one of the things that popped out at me about this encounter was not only the fact that this object was so perfect and looked like it had popped out of a mold, but that it appeared to have some level of consciousness itself. So this object was conscious, and it was communicating with him. How that happens, I have absolutely no idea. But this, you see what I'm getting at? So the manufacturing of something like this, how would you imbue an apparently inanimate, or what would appear to be or should be an inanimate object, a vehicle? How would you imbue that with what we would think of as consciousness, such that this conscious craft communicated with him? You shouldn't be here, and I'm of the opinion now that it may possibly be some sort of a defense mechanism that they've figured out. Whoever some of these folks are, they've figured out consciousness and how to imbue or impart that particular aspect of existence into their tools, into
But can I ask you a
their
question?
instrumentalities. Yeah.
With your background in science, don't you think maybe possibility that these craft could be biological?
Oh, of course. Sure. And I think that we have to pay more and more attention to that possibility, because as we know, DNA, a lot of folks aren't really familiar with what DNA does, but what DNA does is it is a roadmap for proteins. In other words, it provides a blueprint that provides for the production of proteins. And so when you talk about DNA replication, your cells are replicating for the purpose of taking those DNA molecules and transforming them or translating them in biological language from DNA into proteins. And proteins are your body is made of proteins. And so I could certainly conceive of the possibility of DNA perhaps being used to construct an artificial being that has a skin of particular kinds of proteins that may even incorporate metals, certain kinds of rare metals into their substrate, and become impervious to things like radiation. We'll look at tardigrades and their ability to survive in space. It's very possible, in my view, that we may even have organisms much like Tin Man in Star Trek: The Next Generation that are eons and eons in age, but are biological in nature, but yet still function perhaps on some sort of a mechanistic level.
It makes me wonder, too, with these craft, that have crashed, even going back to Roswell, ones in South Africa, and various places in this world where these craft has crashed. Why haven't been contacted by the race? Why aren't they coming back to recover their own craft?
Well, I think they do. I think they do come back, to recover their craft on occasion, but I also think that we're meant to have some of this technology. I think that, first of all, if there is any kind of a galactic federation, and I don't claim that there is or necessarily believe that there is one, but if there is, some kind of a galactic federation operating under some sort of a non-interference directive, if you will, that they have wholly failed at that they, if the goal on Earth was to not interfere with our culture, they have miserably failed at that effort, and in fact have contaminated us with their technology. And I think that they bear some responsibility for the current state of our society and our culture. Because if we had not been exposed to some of their technology and to their, for example, the crash at Roswell, where we likely were able to, get some kinds of materials and other technology, for example.
Okay, Richard, it's at the top of the hour. We need to take this break. It's
Sure.
about 4 minutes long, so if you want to get a cup of coffee, now's the time to do it. Again,
Okay.
everybody, we'll be back with Richard in about 4.5 minutes. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. Check out our website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. We're going to be right back after this, so stay tuned.
time slips. A haunted office building on a haunted street. A haunted coal town. Mysterious black cats. Unexplained light anomalies. UFOs, UAPs in the air and on the ground. Bridges in liminal spaces. Cryptids, shamans, and a werewolf. Disclosure. You don't need a ranch in Utah. All this and more happens in rural southwestern Pennsylvania. Now available on Amazon from author Kevin Paul. Politics and the Paranormal in Greene County, Pennsylvania. Read this captivating book as soon as you can by author Kevin Paul. Coming to you from the great Northwest, this is Night Dreams. Now, here's your host, Gary Anderson, coming to you live from his secret compound.
And we are back with Richard. And, you know, Richard, when you think about these craft that have crashed, you know, again, maybe they have been rescued. But again, if we have maybe shot some of these craft down ourselves with our technology, maybe why haven't they actually did something in return? Now, I will say this. Back about a year and a half ago, I had a 2-star retired Air Force general who worked out at the Pentagon before he retired. He wrote a book, but he couldn't get clearance to get it published. But I had a couple of hours of, talking to him over a couple of week period. And what he swore up and down that, going from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and currently, some of these craft that, they claim are jets that had a training accident or a malfunction was not a malfunction or that. They were dispatched because there was a craft. And they went to intercept the craft. And when they locked onto it, the craft, well, something happened to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not sure I understand your question, except that I don't think that it is a good idea to assign human thinking to them. In other words, their retaliation or showing their strength or something of that nature may not be anything that they would consider. I think that ultimately what we have to come to grips with is that it is the visitors, whoever they are themselves, who are responsible for the secrecy. In other words, if it was they, whoever they are, if it was their desire that humanity should be made aware of them, then they would, do what is necessary to do that. As we have just, they've said in the past, land on the White House lawn, which they allegedly they have done by the Washington flyovers and so forth. But really, ultimately, I think it's the visitors themselves that are in charge of the secrecy. And I think there are many different reasons why they don't want us to know. And I cannot begin to go beyond my own human experience to speculate about what those reasons might be, except to the extent that they don't necessarily want us to know what they are up to. And when I talk about they, again, I'm talking about, civilizations on many different levels of technology from many different parts of the universe, perhaps even from, adjacent universes, all with their own agendas and their own ideas about how we fit into their paradigm.
And that's scary. Think about this. Look at how humans have been since the dawn of civilization. And, again, I've had so many people sit there and say, hey, you know what? They would never hurt mankind. They're not violent. But what has mankind been since Cain and Abel? We have killed each other and still killing each other, and we're not going to make it to one civilization at this rate. They could look at us as no more than, flies. I mean, one of these days we could be visited by a race, right, that might look at us and say they shouldn't exist. That's the scary part.
Well, I think that's very possible. It's probably not going to happen in our lifetimes, and let's admit that is a very remote possibility, but it is a possibility nonetheless. But I think that it's a mistake to assume that I've heard it said that any civilization that could attain interstellar travel could by its very nature not be a violent or a malevolent civilization, and I take issue with that. I think that it's very possible that there are galactic empires out there, if you will, that run everything within their particular spheres of influence, much like the Empire in Star Wars, but in a much more insidious and an invasive way. But I think it's wrong for us to assume that these other civilizations are going to be benevolent, because we don't know what they want. And I think that in order for us to preserve our own safety, we have to sort of assume that their intentions may not necessarily be benevolent. And I think that we can gather that information and reach that conclusion just simply by the fact that they are in fact concealing themselves to a certain extent. If they really wanted to, I mean, they could simultaneously land in several towns and cities all over the world and just get out of their crafts and start going out and meeting people and saying, "Hi, how you doing?" It would not be that difficult an undertaking. All they would have to do is land a few craft in a few large cities, not just hover over it like in Childhood's End.
But what would happen to them? What would the population do? Let's be honest with you. There's a lot of people that carry guns. You have the police, you have the military. If a craft came down and they got out to shake hands with you or me, how many people are going to be pointing rifles at them and pulling the trigger?
I'm sure that they're more than aware of that, whoever they are, again, if there are any they. I don't claim to know that there are. All I claim to know is people who claim to have firsthand experiences. I can't say that I've ever had any myself, except for I did see and record my first UFO last summer. But nonetheless, I can't say for sure what is behind all this, but I do know if there is an intelligence behind it, they certainly could let us all know if they wanted to that they are here. They could tell us everything about them. All those questions that we want to know, the answers to, like, where do you come from? That's always going to be the first one. Why are you here? How did you find us? What do you think about us? Are there some things about us that you think we should change? What's different about us from what you see? I mean, just an unending list of questions that you would want to ask someone from another world. And I hope that someday we have, an opportunity like that. But,
okay, but you do done and do criminal law too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, if I go down and I go out and get a van, steal a van, and I go kidnap somebody, and I take them to a motel room, and I decide I'm going to harvest their kidneys, I'm going to harvest some body part, or I'm just going to experiment on them because I'm crazy. When I get caught, what's going to happen to me?
Well, of course, you're going to get charged with all kinds of crimes, all depending on how you did it, where you did it. You're going to get charged with, aggravated assault, perhaps even attempted murder, and there are going to be very serious consequences for you. But
that's
if you're an alien being,
yeah,
who's going to arrest you? And
No, but
and how
here's the point. If they are, again, I get these people, Richard, that say that they are looking after us. They would never hurt mankind. But yet I have had, through the years, a lot of people who claim they were abducted and taken aboard on a craft, experimented on, had been opened up, prodded, poked, you name it. Saw other people in test tubes, humans in test tubes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
If they really cared about us, why would they do this? And again, as you with your background in science, how many times do they have to sit there and abduct people for their DNA? That part don't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we're probably talking about different groups of these visitors, and the ones that are interested in our genetics, manipulating us, perhaps incorporating us into some sort of a hybrid program. Those are not necessarily the same visitors or aliens, if you will, that are concerned about our well-being. And I do think that that's very possible. I don't know if you remember, we may have discussed the last time I was on about the so-called friendship cases in the late 50s and in early 60s in Italy, where there were a number of contactees, many of them, who encountered various races of human-looking aliens, if you will, that interacted with them personally. That they visited their bases. They took them for rides on their spacecraft. And do you remember hearing about any of those cases in Italy in the 50s and 60s? The friendship cases.
Yeah, I still get them on. I still hear about them to this day. But yes, in the late 50s and early 60s, yes.
Yeah, there was a guy that I don't think he's with us any longer, but a guy named Stefano Breccia that wrote a couple of books about that. Mass Contact, I think, is one of the books, and included in those books are some very interesting images that were allegedly taken aboard some of these craft, and they a lot of the participants took lengthy 8mm films of these guys, like the I'm trying to think of the writer that they all hung out with. His name was Samachicha, and anyway, it was a contact case, or a series of contact cases that lasted for many years, and they established relationships with these alleged aliens who had bases underneath the Mediterranean Sea. Had bases basically anywhere they wanted them, because they could easily construct these bases using some kind of a technology that allowed them to instantaneously displace any volume of soil that they wanted to at any depth. So they had rather large bases that they could construct and deconstruct almost instantaneously. They didn't have openings that went into their bases, like a cave or something like that. They would simply make an opening in the earth to get to where they were going, and then the opening would simply close and the earth would return to its prior state. So that was the level of technology, at least that they were talking about in these, and that Stefano Breccia talks about in these books with the contactees. And there are several. Well, I don't know if there are many of them left alive still, but there were here just within the last few years several of those witnesses that participated in those friendship events that were still alive, and we're talking about their experiences with these human aliens who had nothing, really were benevolent, and had nothing but our well-being in their intentions, but they also needed a certain amount of reciprocation from the humans, which always seemed to falter, and eventually those contacts came to an end. But they represented a race, or at least an organization of so-called human worlds. They had a technology that worked off of love. They had an actual a being that that they talked about they called it Ureta, and it was also a power source that powered their mechanisms. They had weapons that, you would, and I'm just sort of repeating, what these all these friendship folks said, the folks that participated in this, but they had weapons that were defensive only. They could kill, but these beings would just as soon would rather die themselves than kill another being, even what they called the contraries, which are what we were talking about a few minutes ago, which are the folks that are interested in harvesting our DNA, using the planet for its resources and so forth. But again, I think this is just all taking place on a level that's just beyond human comprehension. Essentially, there's just no way to get to the bottom of this well that just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. You know what I'm saying, Gary?
Well, Richard, here's the thing too. Again, if they are abducting people and experimenting on people, that tells me they really don't really care or look at a human life like we do. Of course, I don't know how we do, because look what we do. But I mean, when you really think about it, to subject people through all that horrible pain, and the part that really gets me confused, these abductees always say the same thing after they've been abducted, is that afterwards they told us we need to make these changes on our planet to keep existing. And they say all this stuff, nice things afterwards. That part to me is like two-faced. I don't understand what is going on. And here's the thing too, is all these people are coming forward and saying that they have been abducted and implanted and all this stuff. Now, I know that some of the people have been implanted. I had a person that the Dr. Roger Lear removed the implant on my show a couple of times. I seen his implant, a photo of it. I had Whitley on numerous times through the years, again, with his implant. Something is going on. And that's the part that I'm really concerned about. If these things are actually going on, we have no control on this planet of what's happening. You could be taken tonight or tomorrow. And I'm not talking about the ice. I'm talking about, ETs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this goes to something that's been alluded to, especially recently, in light of Matthew Brown, the new whistleblower guy. He was talking about, the fact that we really do live in sort of a constructed reality, in a matrix, if you will, that's been constructed for us. That the nature of reality is considerably different than what we have been led to believe, and that is because we're not taking into consideration this much broader, much more beautiful universe that is around us that we are really sort of completely oblivious to, and that humans are much more important, perhaps, in the scheme of things than we realize. But nonetheless, there's a chosen few out there that have sort of designed our reality for us, and that's something that we talked about earlier tonight. But I think that we have to take into consideration that there are forces beyond our control, and no, we don't know everything, and we will never, in this particular incarnation, this physical incarnation, will never know everything. We are sort of in the dark, and what are the motivations of these visitors? We can only speculate, but it's scary.
But here's the thing: if they wanted to help us, why haven't they came and helped us? Why haven't they stopped the wars? Why haven't they stopped diseases and death? Why didn't they come around when we had COVID? Or why didn't they come around anytime and help mankind?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't answer that. I can't answer that for you, Gary, other than to say that the battle lines may stretch far beyond the shores of Earth. and that it's not just a battle here on Earth for disclosure, but also a sort of an ongoing battle that is almost axiomatic between good and evil. And there is some sort of force at play here that prevents either side from gaining an advantage. And I think ultimately, when it comes to something like disclosure, that these things are being perpetuated for some reason. They never seem to reach any sort of a culmination. And so that's the frustrating part. I think another thing that we were talking about a little bit earlier is that they just sort of drag us along and drag us along and drag us along. But I think that there's an ongoing battle, and it may be that they want to help us, but they're prevented by, some superseding set of rules that we're not familiar with, as are the other forces. But it seems like the forces of evil, appear to be more in control now than the forces of light. I don't know how you feel about that, but it seems like that's the case.
Well, again, too, disclosure. I keep hearing the word disclosure, whistleblowers, right?
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, none of them have come out and honestly said anything credible. None. Nada. I've had a couple on the show. None of them came out and said anything groundbreaking, anything at all. It's all, again.
It's all stuff that we've heard before. Some would argue that it's confirming things that we always suspected. But my understanding is that David Grush has been in a skiff with some members of Congress recently and has been able to divulge some of the information that he promised to divulge. But they've just been, trying harder than hell to get these guys, or at least Grush, into a skiff so he can say exactly where he got his information and where these alleged sites are and who the individuals are that are in charge of the programs, all those things that he promised to divulge in a skiff. But again, when this goes back to, this kind of touches on the book that I just wrote, called The Need to Know the History, Law, and Practice of American Secrecy. And this goes into the manner in which classified information is handled and the hurdles that have to be overcome, especially when it comes to not only, not necessarily special access programs, because there's a certain level of access to those by the Gang of Eight and so forth. But when you start talking about unacknowledged and ultimately waived unacknowledged special access programs in which these sorts of endeavors fall, then you're talking about little to no communication with Congress at all. And who's in control of that? I would argue that any information related to the back engineering, or at least the possession of alien technology and the study thereof, is in the possession of private corporations, and those private corporations are holding it for their own purposes. And this is what we talked about earlier too, in that the whole purpose behind that is to dominate the planet. That whoever figures this technology out first. So it's not just a race between countries to figure it out, so that that their particular ideology prevails in the long run. This is about corporations figuring it out, so that just a small number of people have control of this technology for the purpose of dominating the entire planet, and that means enslaving all the rest of us. That's the ultimate purpose, and this is why corporations hold it, because someone, whoever that is going to control the planet using this technology if and when they figure it out. Well, and I think they have figured some things out, but that is the true threat to our freedom, and not just as Americans, but our freedom as human beings, our fundamental right to know who we are and where we came from and the nature of the universe, and to know that we're not alone. And the powers that be don't want us to know those things.
But, let's backtrack this a little bit. Just think about technology. If you could take something in a 12 by 12 inch box and put it in your garage and power your house, your heat, your power, everything for nothing other than the cost of the box. If everybody did that, what would happen? The same thing with your car. You could power the car, your vehicle, without having to use petroleum. What would happen to our financial markets worldwide? Everything would collapse.
Right. They've done projections on that. If there was some, groundbreaking energy technology like that, they've done studies to show that, of course, the world economy would collapse because it's based on on fossil fuels, and there would be a horrible period of transition. But then after that transition, you can imagine the abundant earth that would follow. I mean, we would be almost completely eliminating pollution, the pollution of our atmosphere. We would have clean skies, clean air, clean water, and all of the food that we would possibly need, because the energy costs would be zero to nothing to run tractors and run mills and whatever in factories. No cost at all, and no environmental costs. And so you can imagine, but can you imagine, though, the folks that have big piles of money sitting there, how they would not want that to happen? Why would they want everyone to have, everything they ever wanted? Because then they can't have more than everybody else. And I think that there's a psychology behind these people that prevent this technology from coming forward, and who are attempting to usurp the technology. It's these folks that just have to control everything, that just can't stand the thought of people doing something that maybe they might not agree with, and not being able to mold the world to the way you perceive it or believe that it should be. I can't believe that there are people out there and that are like that. And unfortunately, they are also the same people who find great pleasure in accumulating large amounts of wealth. So when you have all the wealth in the world, the only thing that is any more intoxicating than that is power. So when you have all the wealth in the world and you don't have all of the power, then there's just an empty hole in your heart that just never got filled because of those hugs that you never got from your mom and dad.
You're right, Richard. But there was one point in my life in the 80s, I became a multi-millionaire. I used to design computer components also, besides being on, doing radio. And I worked with Dr. Wayne, coming up with ideas on computers and all that stuff, designing stuff like that. And I became rich. And I'll tell you what happened. I became the biggest asshole in the world. I had to go out and buy big. I bought a boat. That wasn't big enough. I had to buy a bigger boat. That wasn't big enough. I had to buy 100-and-some foot boat. That still wasn't big enough. I was going through Corvettes, a couple of different ones, and limos and all this stuff. And I was never happy. And one day the computer market took a big dump, and you know what? I was broke. And I'll tell you what, I'd rather be broke than have all the wealth in the world, because you know what? When you get to that point, I can see it, because they want more, and they want more control. And then that's what the scary part is. After a while, buying material objects isn't good enough. You want more. You want control.
Yeah, just imagine having billions of dollars, approaching trillions of dollars. I mean, what is there that is not available to you? And the answer to that is, power. It's the power that you don't have. And so it's not necessarily the guy that has the biggest pile of money, but the person that has the most power and influence, and that becomes, in my view, probably the most intoxicating part of this whole paradigm that these guys have built up. And it's unfortunate because, in my view, in my opinion, the vast members of the human race, most of us are decent people. That's not to say that, that we don't have a horrible dark side, but humans also have a beautiful, enlightened side. There's a part of us that can express such beauty and empathy and love, but there's also that other part of us that sort of thrives on darkness and argument and negativity and winning and being being the richest, there's something about that sort of way of thinking that sort of counteracts all the good things. And my point that I was trying to make earlier is that we sort of find ourselves, in my opinion, at the interplay between those two forces, not only in our own personal lives, but nationally in our politics, globally in our politics, but also on this intergalactic, interdimensional level, where there is this constant interplay between the forces of good and evil, much like the yin and yang symbols, and it never ends, and it will never end. That at one point there may be some maybe there is a civilization that or some number of folks that figure this technology out, and they dominate civilization for the next however many thousand years. But like any other empire, it will fall. And what will replace it? Will humans still be around? Will we destroy ourselves yet, even after having access to not only artificial intelligence, but all these wonderful new technologies? Will we, as a species, snuff ourselves out ultimately, or will we become a spacefaring species that peacefully goes out into the universe and interacts with other species, just like in Star Trek or something like that? That's always sort of the universe that I want to live in, but I whether that actually happens, I don't know. Maybe some incarnation of me will exist in the future to be able to see some of that come to fruition.
I hope so, because the rate things are going, it's really getting scary out there. Really, it really is. Again, getting back to people who are whistleblowers, don't they risk if they are telling the truth? Aren't they, even if they're lying, okay, for their 2 minutes of fame, aren't they risking their life by coming out and making these claims?
Well, if they're lying, they're really not risking their life because they're not divulging any national security information. But if they are whistleblowers and they're telling the truth, then there is some protection for them by going through the formal whistleblowing process as provided by the Whistleblower Protection Act. But even that, I think Matthew Brown will talk about that they have failed to protect him, even though he's gone through all of the steps. And I think any of the whistleblowers who have actually gone through the process like Grush did, with starting off by making a report to the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community, the ICIG, and going through that process, and then them conducting their own investigation, and then the Inspector General reaching the conclusion that Grush's allegations were urgent and worthy of further investigation. Even those guys that go through that process, they still find themselves at threat. They're still threatened. I know that this is one of the reasons that Lou Elizondo lives in the middle of nowhere. Why he's armed, because they have had their lives threatened, even though they've gone through this process and purportedly have earned some protection from Congress, but they still run the risk of being killed. And I don't believe that that is beyond the capabilities or beyond the historical modus operandi of some of these 3-letter agencies or secret agencies or cabals, if you will, that do what they need to do in order to
How about corporations?
suppress the information. They're at the bottom of this. This is about greed. This is about technology and money and greed and power. So corporations are right there, and I think that there is an element of the corporate and military world that has melded, so that we have essentially a secret corporate / military entity or entities out there that take matters into their own hands when necessary. And these are the folks that are in possession of these exotic technologies. And they want to keep that to themselves. They don't want the information getting out, and it never will. It's never going to get out unless, unless there's some form of catastrophic disclosure.
Back in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of scientists who worked in certain labs that kind of like disappeared over a couple month period. That was scary. We're going to take one call in. Who do we have?
Hi, this is Barb.
Hi, Barb. How's it going tonight?
Pretty good.
You got a question for Richard?
Yeah. First, I want to thank you for coming on and let you know that you're really giving me a lot to think about, the way you look at things and put things together.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I have an idea based on one of the things. This might sound crazy, but you were speculating about using DNA to make the ships biological in the, along with the metal components.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you thought it might be possible that they might be using our DNA, they might be using us to harvest our DNA to do that.
I think that it's very possible. And I think what happens with these folks that are manipulating our DNA and using our DNA, that they have probably done this and do this all over the place, at least anywhere that is within their traveling reach, so that they're out harvesting genes. And what I mean by that is it's probably a pretty efficient way of coming up with new gene sequences that maybe they hadn't thought of before. So I think that's possible, that they could, that it may be that humans are useful for our DNA because of the variety of genes that our DNA produces. And it may be that some of the sequences that we have in our genes are helpful in perhaps the construction of mechanisms that operate within our atmosphere. Whether or not they're actually using our DNA to construct these craft or not, I don't know. But I do think that on a certain level, one could look at DNA itself and the gene sequences that are coded by the DNA as a resource in itself.
Okay. I think we got another caller. Who do we have?
Art.
Hi, Art. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, okay. It's very interesting, and you're always answering my questions again. But I wanted to ask him, what do you think about well, you just mentioned it, like Star Trek, Babylon 5, meaning that do we have a galactic federation, and some way of saying to you that the things that I've met people here who had seen things, and I've seen their crafts, and I've seen some, and they were all different shapes, and ones that have been spotted like the cigar shape, a walnut shape, and there's one in the 15th century, the one with like a cone with the spikes on it. It has a little man in there in the biblical book. Putting all that together, could they all be from different timelines, or would they actually just all know one another because there's so many different kinds of ships, and also like our ships, the Triangle and the Chevron and other ones like that we might have in the engineerings that we might have gotten from them. And I'll take it off the air. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Art.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Art. I think that there's there are a lot of different ways to look at that. I if there are, in fact, and first of all, I would be lying if I tried to tell you that I know something about, the existence of some kind of galactic federation or something like that, or if they all know about each other. But logically, it would seem to me that if there are a number of potentially spacefaring civilizations visiting our planet for many different reasons, that there wouldn't be any reason why they would not be aware of each other. And that would also lead one to the possibility that these civilizations have been around for considerably longer period of time than our own civilizations, and that there may be some sort of a structure within which these extraterrestrial civilizations must conduct themselves. In other words, some sort of a set of rules, not necessarily a galactic federation, but perhaps an overriding set of rules imposed by who, I have no idea, but perhaps some sort of a super intelligence. But it's easy to imagine that there is something akin to a galactic federation, but whether there is or not, I can only speculate. But it would seem to me that possibility exists, and I do think that to a certain extent, we have been, as a species, sort of drip fed a lot of this information about the existence of extraterrestrials and so forth for the purpose of perhaps softening the blow. But again, Art, I cannot tell you, and there is nothing in my realm of knowledge that would lead me to be able to tell you that, yeah, there's a galactic federation out there. I have to say that I hear people talking about these things all the time. Oh, yeah, there's a galactic federation, and they're doing this and that, and I just sort of have to listen to that. And when I hear that sort of stuff, I just have to think, how in the hell do you know? Where are you getting your information? Because there's nobody that's truly in the intelligence community that's coming forward and actually, saying this over and over again. I know that there was that Israeli commander fellow alluded to the possibility of a galactic federation or whatever, but I'm not going to throw all my eggs in that basket until I see some real information about it myself. And so all I can do is speculate and about the possibility, and I do think that possibility exists, Art. I think that it's very possible that there is some kind of a galactic federation out there, if you will, or at the very least, some sort of basic set of rules established by someone somewhere that under which all of these civilizations are required to operate.
Well, they need to tell us. I tell you that. If you really think about this, so many people, as of, I just checked the other day, I won't even tell you how many podcasts there is. And one of the main subjects is either cryptics or UFOs. We go through cycles, through the years. It's about ghost hunting, then it's cryptics, then it's UFOs, and it goes back and forth through the years. But right now, a lot of people are making these assumptions that all this stuff is real, and they really got themselves convinced, oh, they're here to help us, or they're here to tear our planet apart, with no knowledge at all. I have no knowledge what's going on. How can I sit there and make all these claims? And if you go listen to all these different shows, you hear all this stuff, and it's really, really scary.
Well, it is, and again, I think it's important to take all of that stuff sort of with a grain of salt. Anyone who claims, to know about things or to have certain areas of expertise, I sort of like to look at their backgrounds and say to myself, well, this is someone perhaps that could know about some of the things that they're talking about. But there are right now, especially on the internet and on YouTube and so forth, there's a lot of stuff about UFOs and aliens, and it's all the rage, especially in this so-called age of disclosure, which again I don't think is ever going to happen. But that's all the rage, and there are so many people out there making so many outrageous claims that really, I mean, I think you can count on maybe 4 or 5% of what you hear out there as being based in some kernel of truth. I do think that the truth is that this phenomenon is real.
Oh yeah.
That UFOs are in fact real. That they represent some kind of technology that we don't understand, and it's likely some kind of non-human technology. I can't throw my weight behind any particular whistleblower. I am simply partial to Lou Elizondo because I've met him and had a little bit of time to spend some time with him, and I honestly think that he is a really good guy.
I honestly think if he came and really spilled the beans, I think his life wouldn't be worth 2 cents also.
Well, that's the thing. Lou always knows right where the line is, and he will never cross that. But there's no question that he possesses national security information that he has not divulged and will not divulge because he is true to his oath, and he wants to maintain his security clearance. And I certainly would never. He never told me anything that would be considered classified. But I do think that individuals like Lou Elizondo are in fact telling the truth as they see it, at least from what they know and from their perspective. Whether or not that fits in with what others say, although I do think that it certainly does, that we're starting to put some pieces together that are making a very compelling picture of what's going on. But there's no question in my mind that the phenomenon is real and that there is some kind of intelligence behind it. The conclusion I've reached, though, is that we have to look to folks like Jacques Vallée, who tell us that this is something that is much more complex than simply little green men coming here or little gray men coming here in flying saucers from a different planet using some sort of interstellar drive technology. That it's much more complex than that. Our history is heaped in stories of the paranormal, fairies and ghosts and monsters and chimeras and all this, and it may be that some of those things are based in some hidden truth that has been kept from us for a very, very long time. What I hope is that my hope for mankind is that we achieve a certain level of enlightenment, and I truly believe that we're going to be in really bad times until we learn to trust and love one another. And I think that if there were benevolent aliens out there, that's what they would want for us, that we learn to love each other more than we love our own selves. In other words, we view every other person on the planet as a member of our own family, whom we would sooner die ourselves than kill or harm. And until then, I think that we're going to be in a lot of hurt. In other words, I guess, Gary, the meek, in my view, shall and should inherit the earth. And what I mean by that is this is more than just turning the other cheek. It's learning to love one another on the same level that you love the members of your own immediate family, your mother, your father.
We lost that. You remember TV shows like Donna Reed, Father Knows Best, all that. Society has changed. People don't help people anymore. I remember when I was a kid, the neighbor's garage caught on fire. And you know what they did? The next week, all the neighbors on that block, they all got together and built him a new garage. People don't do that no more. Back in the 1800s, 1900s, when a person's lost their home, they brought food over. They gave them love. They gave them companionship. They rebuilt their house. People don't even know their neighbors anymore. I live where I live now, going on 25 years. I barely talk to the neighbor behind me. I've never talked to either neighbor next to me because they're antisociable. People have changed, and that's what's scary. And I will say this again. I used to have a friend who's passed away. He was with the CIA. And we had a conversation one time. I said, you know what? If the government ever came out and said they are ETs, and, what would happen if they invade us? Or even just if the government came out and said we could be invaded by ETs. We don't know if they're a national threat. He told me, this is going back 4 years ago. He goes, regardless what you hear from people would panic all across the country. A lot of people I have on the show, ufology, people are now conditioned. They wouldn't panic, but they do. Yeah. Look what happened when we had COVID. People fighting over freaking toilet paper, looting department stores. The Target got looted right down to everything. And society starts falling apart. That's the scary part. I don't think we are at the level yet, if the government ever told us this stuff is real, that the society could handle it.
I agree with you, Gary, and I can tell you that I told that to Andre Carson when we met with him in Washington, and us and me and some of the other board members met with him to discuss these matters, and the question came up, can we tell the people? And my response was no, which, much to the chagrin of my colleagues who were, taken aghast by my response to the congressman. But I said no, because of the factor that you're talking about there. And I think it comes down to this fundamentally. And that is that we all have an ego. We all have that part of our human personality that tells us, where we are in society, in the universe. We are part of a culture or a country on a particular location on a planet. It sort of places us in the universe and tells us how we belong in the world. We are alone, right? And then one day, someone comes along and tells the whole human race, you are not alone. Everything that you've been told is incorrect, not only about your own origins, but about who you are and where you are going. And what that would cause is the restructuring of the ego. In other words, you're talking about the simultaneous restructuring of every human ego on the planet, and you cannot predict the outcome of that event.
I think it would be a collapse of society as we know it.
I completely agree for a while, but there would, it may even lead to complete and utter destruction, because the guys that have their fingers on the button may say, oh, screw it.
Yeah, that's scary too.
You don't know how it's going to affect every individual on the planet. And in my view, from a national security perspective, that is why you don't want to tell people, because of the potential cultural shock. And it won't be just, oh wow, I can't believe there's aliens. I mean, there's a qualitative difference. Even in those of us who have been studying this for a long time, there is a qualitative difference between understanding that something is real and actually knowing that it is real, reaching the ultimate realization that something is real. And the way you do that is by actually having an experience yourself, or being part of a mass experience where you come face to face with aliens or come face to face with their technology. And when you know, you find that you are much further removed from your fellow humans than you can possibly imagine. Just those of us, as you can probably attest yourself, who have an interest in this particular topic, have found ourselves far removed from humanity, more and more so over time because of the level of understanding that we begin to achieve by looking into these matters. It's like once you rise above the forest and see the forest through the trees, it's very difficult to go back to the forest floor again.
So well. Now, your new book, when is it coming out? And can you tell the listeners about it?
Yeah, it's on Amazon right now. It's called Need to Know: The History, Law, and Practice of American Secrecy. And what I talk about in the book is the evolution of espionage from essentially the beginning of history and the ultimate evolution of our own American system of secrecy and how we have constructed that based upon the laws that we have passed. You can't do anything in the United States officially as the government unless there is some legal authority that provides for your ability to do that. And so there are a plethora of statutes and executive orders and administrative regulations that govern the operation of secrecy in the United States. So we're talking about how the intelligence community interacts with members of the intelligence community, other members of the intelligence community, and how information is kept secret, how it's classified, declassified, how it's disseminated, and ultimately how you obtain the clearances and so forth to get to that. And so it discusses all of this, and ultimately also discusses what I call the greatest secret of all, which is of course the secrets around UAPs. Or UAP, and I still prefer the term UFO, to be quite honest. I don't like the rebranding, just simply because it seems kind of hacks me off that they're just trying to rebrand it because it's the same old phenomenon that we've always believed was real. But anyway, I ultimately talk a little bit about that and how all these rules, regulations, and statutes come together to provide the foundation under which these types of things are kept secret, and how the secrecy around these things are maintained. Essentially, the best kept secrets are those that are kept between the two or amongst the few. So that's more or less what the book is about. It helps just lay people to understand the rules and regulations that lay the foundation for this kind of secrecy.
Again, it's available on Amazon, and I really recommend checking it out. Well, Richard, just like the last time you were on, it's nice to have fresh approach to the whole subject, and that's what I enjoy with you. You're not set like a lot of people are that I bring on that are so narrow-minded, and that's what I enjoy about having you as a guest.
Well, I really appreciate that, Gary. I try to maintain an open mind, and I by no means have any answers, let alone some answers.
Okay, my friend. Again, I want to thank you for coming on, and keep up in touch with us, will you?
I certainly will. I appreciate you having me on, Gary. It's been another enjoyable visit. Thank you very much.
Okay, my friend. Well, JC, who do we have lined up for next week on the show?
Well, next week we're going to have Mr. Matt Laszlo coming on. He's known as a UFO journalist on Disclosure. He intermingles with a lot of the people down there in D.C., Gary, with the whole UFO subject. And then next Saturday we're going to have Mr. Graham Phillips coming on talking about King Arthur.
That's going to be really interesting, too. So that's going to be good. He is a UK author, very famous. King Arthur, they've actually found some information to prove that, well, King Arthur actually existed. I hope you enjoy the show. We try to bring on guests that a lot of shows don't do. If you have a guest idea, contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com. That's nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com. Our website is nightdreamstalkradio.com. I'd love to have you check out our website and tell your friends about us. We are growing so fast on YouTube, and a big shout out to all the truckers out there. I keep forgetting about you. If it wasn't you, we wouldn't probably be where we're at. Isn't a day I don't get a lot of emails from you, the truckers out there, and people on Messenger, truckers out there, saying how you enjoy the show. And you know, JC, they have a tendency of spreading the word about us.
They do. And listen, as great they are for spreading and delivering products, they're just as good for spreading the word about us.
Yeah, and also I was informed by one trucker up here in the Northwest, better stock up in toilet paper because you know what? There's going to be a shortage on toilet paper starting here next week. So you better go out and get it. Everybody have a good one. Again, I want to thank Barb for calling in, Art for calling in, and everybody have a good one. We'll catch you on the other side.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the...
Do you have a mother with a weird sense of humor? We have the perfect solution to your potential gift-giving conundrum. Buy for Mom this great read, The Expectant Mother Disinformation Handbook. It's the latest book by Robert Guffey, author of Chameleon. In the pages of the handbook, you will learn about the dangers of allowing your fetus an in utero internet connection, the growing problem of terrorism in the womb, and the little-known fact that Shakespeare created pregnancy, among other esoteric secrets. The Expectant Mother Disinformation Handbook is available directly from Madness Heart Press and Amazon.com.
No infants were harmed in the making of this handbook.
The Expectant Mother Disinformation Handbook by Robert Guffey. Order now. Available now. Bigfoot Origins, The Search for the Cryptid Homeland by Mike Dupler. This is the most comprehensive and in-depth examination of Bigfoot ever written. How did Bigfoot in North America, the Yowie in Australia, and the Woodwoes, Britain's Bigfoot, get to where they are today? Mike Dupler connects the dots, and the conclusions are incredible. This changes everything. Don't be left out in the woods, in the cold, not knowing. Read Bigfoot Origins, The Search for the Cryptid Homeland by Mike Dupler. Available now on Amazon.